Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Bismillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala, amma ba'd. I greet you in this second episode in relation to Hijra. And Hijra, as was discussed in the previous video, in Arabic means to leave something for something else, and in Islam means to leave non-Muslim countries for Muslim countries. Before anything else, the Muslim person, man or woman, must do hijrah with his heart from what Allah didn't allow, which we call in Arabic haram, to what Allah loves and allowed, which can be either wajib, obligatory, mustahab, recommended, or halal or mubah, allowed, permissible. So that is the first step in doing hijrah for a Muslim. Many Muslims, unfortunately, they want to impose on Allah what they want, what they think, what their parents think, what their sheikh thinks. And that is why I finished the last video by saying that we must make sure that we follow the Quran and Sunnah, not according to our desires. So when we get an ayah, a verse from the Quran or a hadith, narration from the Prophet ﷺ, we try to make it fall into what we want. No, that's not correct. The correct way is to look at the Quran and Sunnah with an open heart and open mind and follow it, despite what people say, especially non-Muslims, because they will always have issues with us following our religion, as Allah said in the Quran. In this particular episode, I want to address a few issues. The most important of them being what the scholars of today and the majority, the big scholars, and I don't mean those whom people call doctor or PhD in Islam, or that he comes on this particular channel or he has so many followers. No, I don't mean that, because a scholar in Islam is a person who has spent his entire life researching and practicing Islam, preaching it in word and deed. And also other scholars have said that he is a scholar. So for that reason, I have chosen this particular volume, which is volume number 12, from the fataawa, the religious verdicts of the Lajna Da'ima, fataawa al-Lajnati Da'imati lil-Buhuth al-Ilmiyati wal-Ifta', which means the fataawa of the permanent committee for the Islamic research and giving fataawa. This is about 20-something volumes. This is the collection of their fatwa when Sheikh Ibn Baz rahimahullah was the chairman of this committee, and it included, as it always does, this permanent committee in Saudi Arabia includes and has included and will include in the future the very, very best of the scholars and the biggest of the scholars, unless they themselves do not want to be included in it. So it's a very prestigious body for those people who want to follow the Sunnah and to see their understanding. In addition to this, we have the fatwa of Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah, which are very well known in relation to Hijrah, in relation to living with non-Muslims in their countries. And this, of course, I mean by that the general rule. And the same applies to Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen. You can see Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen fatwa in his when he went to Boston before he died, when he was diagnosed with cancer and he was forced to go to get treatment from Boston, USA. And there he was asked about that, and he was asked about working in non-Muslim countries. Also, he has his views on Hijrah in many other books. One of them is the explanation of Thalathatul Usul, the explanation of the three fundamental principles. So these are, and the same applies to other ulama. And I want to emphasize these are kibar al-ulama. These are the major big scholars. I'm not saying anything from myself. Just I want to relay this to other people, because a lot of people, they may not know that their opinion is like this. That's very important. Another point is that I do not mean, and the scholars don't mean, that anyone who has a need, and I will discuss it now, I will relay what the scholars say about visiting non-Muslim countries, especially non-Muslim countries. They do not prevent anyone who is in need and who meets certain criteria and conditions from visiting non-Muslim countries. No, they do not prevent that, but they put strict conditions, all of them. And the reason I'm saying the present day scholars is because there has never been a time in the history of Islam when Muslims wanted and desired to live in non-Muslim countries with non-Muslims in the same way as in our time. Before, if you look at the history, you can find a lot of fataawa of different big ulama from the time of Sahaba all the way to our time. You will not find that in their time Muslims were with probably millions, in their millions. For example, if you look in Western Europe, they are in Western Europe in millions. You will never find that Muslims by themselves would go and live with non-Muslims before our time. That normally never happened. To the extent that many scholars used to consider a person doing that as a person who doesn't like his religion and he likes the religion of other people. So it was very tough. So I want to mention this as a duty on myself. I'm not trying to please anyone. I'm not on anyone's payroll, alhamdulillah. That's a huge favor from Allah upon anyone who is in this position. Just I want, because I am tired of people constantly saying and giving misinformation and saying things that are not true on the issue of Hijra. And I want to show what the scholars say about that. First of all, I want to mention that in relation to a person who must do Hijra, you can have a person, as the scholars said, who is able to practice his religion, but he is residing in a non-Muslim country. So in relation to that, they have a difference of opinion, because a person who is residing in a non-Muslim country, unable to practice his religion, and I mentioned that in the first video, that the view of the scholars of our time is that the people are not able, for example, Sheikh Al-Albani and others, and Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, and they don't think and they don't consider, and we will see a question here given especially on the UK. I'm not making this up. There is a particular question on the UK, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, on Brazil, given to the scholars in this particular book, because here we have jihad, al-jihad, wal-hisbah. Hisbah, it's a different, it doesn't come under our, but whenever the jihad is discussed, hijra is discussed. So it doesn't mean that, like I said in the first video, that we advocate the wrong jihad. But is jihad part of Islam? No doubt about it. Is jihad, does it have conditions? Of course it does. Does any killing of any person, especially innocent or someone who is protected under Islamic law, is that considered jihad? No, of course not. So any jahil who thinks like that, ignorant person, he must refer to the books of Quran and Sunnah and the fataawa of ulama. We have thousands upon thousands of books written in Islam. So why is this one a 12th volume, not volume number 1? Because jihad comes after a lot of things that you must learn and do before you go to that step. So Hijra is discussed here. So the scholars differed in relation to the one who can openly practice his deen in a non-Muslim country. And of course, those who are staying there or who love to stay there, unfortunately, they say that they can practice their religion, as I mentioned in the first video. I personally disagree. So do the scholars who answer these questions when they are given the opportunity. I've had discussions myself with many sheikhs, with many scholars, and when I tell them of the laws being introduced in many non-Muslim countries, they say, how can you live in that country? Whereas before that, I told them of these laws and of the fact, for example, they're teaching them kufr and shirk and homosexuality and many other things, and so-called sexual education. All of this they don't know. So people who ask them, they have a responsibility to tell them the whole picture, but unfortunately many of them they don't. So the difference of the scholars, some said he must migrate in any case, whether he can practice his deen or not. Others said if he can practice his deen openly and openly display the symbols of Islam. And I doubt when a lady cannot wear niqab, how can that be counted as openly practicing the deen? When you cannot even withdraw your child from the classes that our religion doesn't allow, how can they be counted as practicing the deen when you can't hear azan? Many things. So who can practice his deen? Either he can stay, some scholars said, to try and call others to da'wah, to Islam, if he has the ability, and if that doesn't affect his religion. But even they said it's better for him to migrate. And there are those who said in any case a Muslim must not live with non-Muslims because simply it doesn't work. Even if it works for a limited period, in the end Muslims get killed, slaughtered, as it has happened, like I said in the first video, on many occasions in the history of Islam and in the history of mankind. We have a group of people who are in need, meaning that we need them. So those are a special group of people who are exempted from this, again with the condition that their religious practice and the practice of their families is not affected. So if we have an imam of a masjid, of a mosque, and we are in need of him, he must not prefer being an imam in a non-Muslim country to being in a Muslim country if his religion is affected, if he can't have control over his children, if he sees that his children are leaving Islam, his wife is leaving Islam, or they're going to terrible things like homosexuality and things like that. Because in Islam we don't change our views according to the fashion. You know, in Islam we have views and we have, alhamdulillah, our book which doesn't change. We follow it as much as we can. If their religion is not affected, these people we are in need of, then of course in that case they are allowed to stay. So that's another group of people. And scholars, Islamic scholars, as we will see, they don't even allow to travel to non-Muslim countries except with the following three conditions. Firstly, he must have knowledge of Islam to differentiate between truth and falsehood. Secondly, he must be a good Muslim, afraid of Allah, that will prevent him from falling into sins. Thirdly, there must be a need for this visit. So for treatment, for study of a subject that doesn't exist in a Muslim country, and the Muslim government has requested him to go and study, for example, because we are not in charge of countries, we are not responsible in front of Allah for that. We must choose professions that we can study in Muslim countries for the sake of Allah, to protect our religion. For treatment, like I said, for trade, if to go and just come back straight away, to be afraid. A Muslim must be afraid to go to non-Muslim countries because his rights mostly are not protected. Even those areas, some brothers say, we have a Muslim area, of course you have, but just leave that area a few miles, a few kilometers. What do you have? You have bars, pubs, you have half-naked people, you have drinking going on, alcohol being sold from the morning till evening, through the night, openly in almost every corner shop and almost every supermarket, which is not the case in Muslim countries. As much as people who don't like to live in a Muslim country, as much as they want to say, that is not the case in Muslim countries. So, yes, let's have a look at what the ulama say. There is a special section here saying Hijra. So we will have a look here so that you believe me. It says Al-Hijra. So we know what Hijra means. So I will read some questions through. One of the questions here, it says, and of course it's all referenced if you want to have a look, just I don't have much time to include it in the video. ما هي شروط الهجرة في الإسلام? What are the conditions of hijrah in Islam? وما المقصود بقوله this يعني is an additional question, is not really directly related to our topic, but I'll read anyway. And what is meant by the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, عبادة في الهرج كهجرة إلي, to worship Allah in fitna or in killing or during when some strife is going on is like doing hijrah to me. The answer to this question is, they said, الهجرة هي الخروج من بلد الكفر إلى بلد الإسلام. Hijrah is in Islam to leave the non-Muslim country to migrate to a Muslim country. وهي واجبة, and it is wajib. These are not my words. These are the words of the undersigned, Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz, Abdul Razak Afifi, Abdullah bin Ghudayyan, Abdullah bin Qu'ud, rahimahumullah. These four great ulama signed this fatwa. So, and they gave the ayah, قال تعالى إن الذين توفاهم الملائكة ظالمي أنفسهم قالوا فيما كنتم إلى قوله فأولئك مأواهم جهنم وساءت مصيرا. So that ayah I read in the first video, but I will repeat it. The translation, I wrote it down. Ayah number 97 in Surah An-Nisa, Surah Women. Indeed, those whom the angels take upon death while doing wrong to themselves, the angels will say, in what condition were you? They will say, we were oppressed in the land. They, the angels, will say, was not the earth of Allah spacious enough for you to emigrate therein? For those, their refuge is hell, and evil it as a destination. So they gave this ayah, the ulama, and they said, قال ابن كثير على هذه الآية. Ibn Kathir رحمه الله in the tafsir said, هذه الآية الكريمة عامة في كل من أقام بين ظهراني المشركين وهو قادر على الهجرة. This ayah, this holy ayah relates and applies to all those who stay between the mushriks, idolaters, and he is able to do hijrah. وليس متمكنا من إقامة الدين, and he is not able to openly practice his deen. فهو ظالم لنفسه, then he is wronging himself, he is doing wrong to himself. مرتكب حراما بالإجماع. نعم. نعم. أما قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم العبادة في الهرج كهجرة إليه, as for the saying of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, worshipping Allah during fitna is like doing hijrah to me, فهو يدل على فضل العبادة لله وحده في أوقات الفتن والقتال. Then this hadith shows the superiority of worshipping Allah alone in times of fitna and strife and killing. وأنها في الفضل كهجرة للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لما كان المسلمون يهاجرون إليه في المدينة من بلاد الكفر مكة قبل الفتح. And it equates, meaning worshipping Allah in these times, equates in virtue to doing hijrah to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم when Muslims used to migrate to him in Medina from the non-Muslim lands like Mecca before it was conquered. وليس في ذلك دلالة على إسقاط الهجرة عمن تمكن منها. And in this there is no dalil, there is no proof for abolishing the hijrah upon someone who is able to do it إذا كان في بلد الكفر, if he is in a non-Muslim country, ولا يستطيع إقامة دينه بين أولئك الكفرة, and he is not able to practice his religion among those non-Muslims, among those disbelievers. So this is the first fatwa that I wanted to quote, and of course I am not saying this from myself, these are fataawa of ulama, and that's why for me it's very strange when people say we're able to practice our deen. Very, very strange. How can you say that when you're not able to practice, to do your basic duties as a Muslim, for example, to save yourself and your family from the hellfire? It's very strange. So like I said, the undersigned, I mentioned them. The next fatwa is question. ورد في حديث نبوي شريف أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لما فتح مكة قال. It is established in a noble prophetic hadith that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, when he conquered Mecca, said, لا هجرة بعد الفتح. فهل هذا الحديث صحيح? That he said there is no hijrah after the conquest, meaning of Mecca. Is this hadith authentic? وهل يمكننا أن نفهم منه أن المضطهدين في أفغانستان وسوريا وغيرهم أو غيرهم لا يجوز لهم الهجرة من بلادهم أم أن مكة أصبحت دار إسلام لذلك فلا يجوز للمسلم أن يهاجر منها? And do we understand? Of course, this fatwa was a long time ago, Ikhwan, maybe not 20, more than 20 years ago, 20, 30 maybe years ago. And is it possible to understand from this hadith that people persecuted in Afghanistan and Syria and others, that it is not permissible for them to do hijrah from their countries? Or does it mean that Mecca has become a Muslim land, a Muslim city, therefore it is not permissible for a Muslim to do hijrah from it? Al-Jawab, the answer, Al-Hadith لا هجرة بعد الفتح ولكن جهاد ونية, the hadith which says there is no hijrah anymore after the conquest, but jihad remains and good intentions. حديث صحيح, it's an authentic hadith. جاء في صحيح البخاري ومسلم عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما. It is included and collected by Bukhari and Muslim in their Sahih from Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with them, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال في يوم الفتح, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said on the day of conquest, meaning conquest of Mecca, لا هجرة بعد الفتح ولكن جهاد ونية وإذا استنفرتم فانفروا, that there is no hijrah anymore, meaning they will explain what it means after the conquest, but jihad remains and good intentions remain, and when you are called to go forth, meaning for jihad, then go forth. قال الحافظ في الفتح على قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ولكن جهاد ونية. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah said in Fath al-Bari, explaining the saying of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, but jihad and niyyah remain, meaning قال الطيبي وغيره, one of the ulama, Tibi and others, they said هذا الاستدراك يقتضي مخالفة حكم ما بعده لما قبله. This ولكن, because lakin in Arabic means harf istidrak, which means that it's a particle that changes the meaning of what comes after that to what came before lakin. So it means والمعنى أن الهجرة التي هي مفارقة الوطن التي كانت مطلوبة على الأعيان إلى المدينة انقطعت. The hijrah that was required, which means to leave your land, which was required upon every person to go to Medina, it no longer existed. إلا أن المفارقة بسبب الجهاد باقية, except that leaving your country or your city for the cause or for the sake of jihad. And I again reiterate so that people don't take my words out of context. When we say jihad, we mean proper Islamic jihad, not terrorist acts. This remains, the scholars said. وكذلك المفارقة بسبب نية صالحة. The same applies to leaving your land and your motherland because of a good intention. كالفرار من دار الكفر, for example, leaving دار الكفر, non-Muslim country. والخروج في طلب العلم, or going out in search of Islamic knowledge. والفرار بالدين من الفتن, أو الفرار بالدين من الفتن, or like protecting your deen by fleeing from fitan, running away from fitan, from trials and tribulations. والنية في جميع ذلك, and good intention should remain in all of this. انتهى. So the scholars added to this, the scholars who signed this fatwa, same as before, same four, they said والخير له, and it is good for the Muslim, الخروج من أي بلد, to leave any country or land, إذا كان خروجه منها أصلح لدينه, if leaving that country or land is better for his religion. سواء سمي هجرة أم لم يسم, whether it is called hijrah or not called hijrah. So this is a very clear fatwa, and there is not much really I can say, just other than translating, because the only thorny issue in discussions, when we have discussions, and of course we are brothers, we should discuss, but with adab, with good manners, with ilm, with knowledge, and with the desire to follow the haqq, the truth, whenever it appears. So whenever we discuss these issues with brothers, They say that we are able to practice our religion and so on. Another issue they bring is how can Islam spread in non-Muslim countries. Many other issues, and I will inshallah talk about that. Hopefully I will do a special video for those issues, and I will discuss and I will give the opinions of the ulama on that. I will let's have a look. We have how many fatwa here? We have a number of, it's only a few pages, but I wanted to give them all to you because to see how the scholars think really in relation to da'wah, in relation to protecting the Muslim. No. I will just read the last fatwa for this particular video, and then we will have a break. And inshallah, if I'm able to do another video today, I will do. If not, we will do another time. Now, there is another question as well, which is third in this particular chapter. كيف تكون الهجرة في سبيل الله في هذا العصر? How can one do hijrah in the path of Allah in our time? So they said, signed by three ulama, Sheikh bin Baz, Sheikh Afifi, Sheikh Udayan, rahimahumullah. They said, الهجرة في سبيل الله هي الانتقال من بلاد الشرك إلى بلاد الإسلام. Hijrah in the path of Allah is to move from non-Muslim or the countries of shirk, idol worship or disbelief, to the countries of Islam or to the country of Islam. كما انتقل المسلمون من مكة قبل إسلام أهلها إلى المدينة. As the people of Mecca used to move before Mecca became Muslim, they used to move to Medina. لكونها صارت بلد إسلام بعد مبايعة أهلها للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Because after the conquest, Mecca became a Muslim city after they gave the pledge of allegiance to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. وطلبهم sorry, I made a mistake. Medina, يعني is meant here Medina. As the Prophet ﷺ, the people of Medina invited وَطَلَبِهِمْ هِجْرَتَهُ إِلَيْهِمْ, that they gave pledge of allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ, the people of Medina, and they requested him to move to them, to be free to practice and to call, to do da'wah. وتكون الهجرة أيضا من بلاد شرك إلى بلاد شرك أخف شرا. The same also hijrah can be from one non-Muslim country to another which is better than that non-Muslim country. وأقل خطرا على المسلم, and less dangerous for a Muslim. كما هاجر بعض المسلمين من مكة بأمر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى بلاد الحبشة. As some Muslims migrated from Mecca to Ethiopia by the permission and order of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. Inshallah, we stop here. We take a break, and then inshallah we will continue. And please, brothers and sisters, I don't want you to take my word for what I say. I give you fataawa of ulama, and these are very big ulama. I give you their understanding of Islam. I give you the reality which some people don't want to accept. And just think of examples when people did not heed to this call of Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, and their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren became non-Muslims. So please, someone's desire to get a better job, which we will discuss in this particular book, to get a better job, get a better education, as they claim, of course, should not obscure your desire or the Muslims' desire to follow what Allah said. Loving dunya over deen is not acceptable in Islam. So may Allah help all of us, inshallah, to be continued. جزاكم الله خيرا والحمد لله رب العالمين.